You talk about artificial intelligence, typically what you're talking about is machine learning. You're essentially teaching the machine to learn something and then predict something. Ultimately, what AI is really very good at is pattern matching. It's just very complex pattern matching.
Welcome to Veteran Led. Today's guest is Dr. Andy Moye. In this episode, we'll be talking about artificial intelligence startups, specifically in the medical technology space. Dr. Andy Moye is the SVP and GM of data products at Tempus AI, which includes pharmaceutical, biotech, and life science partners. Andy is a former naval aviator who has his MBA and a PhD in health economics and decision making. Welcome to the show, Dr. Moye. You're in an amazing space. You're in the biotech space in a time when people are extremely excited about artificial intelligence. How'd you get involved in it?
Yeah, it wasn't like when I was a kid. I can't wait to get into biotechs and pharma AI. I wanted to be a soldier like my dad. I'm sure we'll get into that, but it's been a really wild ride. I fortunately for me, everything I've always wanted to do has been about service, right? How can I continue to make as big an impact on people as possible? And fortunately, after I got out of the military, I got into this diagnostic space. I started really understanding how cancer gets diagnosed in the US, which is not well, by the way. We'll talk about that. The manual processes that go into that. And over the course of 20 years, I've really found myself sort of at the forefront, sort of the leading edge of all this kind of technology where we're really trying to drag doctors and pharmaceutical companies and researchers into the future where the technology is able to help cancer patients get the right drug, help drug companies develop the right drug so that they don't fail in clinical trials. So it's been sort of a little bit lucky, in a lot of ways, but I think a lot of it's just really came from like, hey, I just want to serve. How can I serve people? How can I continue to serve people,
Yeah, let's get back to that service. As you said, you wanted to be a soldier, but you didn't make it. Instead, you were a naval aviator. So you flew in the Navy, but you got to help people, and you were there in service when 9/11 happened. Take us back to that time.
Yeah, I was deployed 9/11. I was kind of I just kind of out of flight school. You spend about a year and a half, 2 years in flight school. They send you off to a squadron. You don't know anything really. You think you do because you can fly a plane, but you go off. And, we were, I was flying with a crew. It's funny, people forget we were still engaged in the Kosovo Bosnia conflict at the end of the 90s, right? So we were doing these, and so I flew an airplane called the P-3 Orion. The P-30 Orion was kind of a holdover aircraft from the Cold War. It's generally designed, it's a crew-based aircraft, 11 people on the aircraft. They call them combat air crews. And the airplane is designed to hunt submarines. That's what you do, or naval boat. But, after the fall of the Soviet Union, they had to sort of repurpose the aircraft a little bit. And they ended up doing a lot of, what they call ISR, right? Intelligence, surveillance reconnaissance. And so we were doing a lot of that. We were deployed in Sigonella in Italy. We were doing these missions up into the Adriatic and Kosovo and that kind of stuff. And we just happened to be off. Crew just happened to be off that day. We're over at the exchange, standing there looking at the TVs like a bunch of dummies and watching the towers fall. And, fortunately, because I was young and dumb, didn't know anything, my mission commander looked over at us and said, guys, we got to go. What are we doing standing here? And it's funny because in SIG, there's actually an Italian base and an American base. And we were over on the American base, but we were actually stationed on the Italian base. And so we had to get off the American base, which was next to impossible. Some poor MP trying to kill us because she didn't know what was going on, right? But we tried to explain to her, we have to get off this base right now. We got off the base, go to the Italian base. That was another problem to try and get back onto the Italian base. But we did, man. And, like anybody else who served during that time, just no idea what's happening. We stood down all flights for about 4 or 5 days until the orders could come in. And we spent the rest of that deployment, really doing, terrorist hunting. We spent a lot of time combing the coast of Syria, things like that, looking at boats. We did a lot of what's called maritime interdiction ops with the SEALs. which was kind of fun because you'd get over top of a boat and SEALs would take the whole thing down. We got to watch it from, 10,000 feet and those kind of things. So we did that all during 9/11. And then I was, deployed again right before we went into Iraq in 2003.
And now you're in the biotech space. So I want to take you to that because also you chose to go into the medical field to continue to help people and continue to give back, but you didn't choose the easy route. I mean, the startup route, the startup space, the biotech space. I mean, at this point, you're not going into a well-established organization. It's much like you're coming into something entirely new in some cases, well, a little bit more established, but it's much like we would say when we come to set up a forward operating base, right? It's like, this is new territory. And so why take on that challenge? Why not just say, hey, I want to help people. I'm going to go in the med space. Why the innovation? Why the startups?
Yeah, it's funny. I've loved that really bleeding edge technology piece. And it's been something for the past 20 years that I've been part of. And you sort of get a taste of it with innovators. I was very fortunate, as I got out of the military and that transition, like a lot of us struggled. I got in with a company and didn't really understand. I didn't know anything about cancer. My mom had breast cancer when I was a kid, but I didn't really understand it. I didn't know how this whole thing worked. I knew how to fly an airplane. I was getting a master's degree at the time, trying to learn about business, trying to figure this stuff out. And I was just fortunate to be exposed to some really smart people. And one of those guys was a doctor named Dr. Raul Braylon. At the time he was maybe, since 15 years, he was maybe in his late 70s. He was world famous for inventing these diagnostic techniques for blood cancers. And I got to get really close to him because he was just part of the company I was with, and not just shut the mouth off and let the ears open, right? And just listen, right? And just ask as many questions as possible. And we had another guy named Dr. Dan Van Hoff, and Dr. Van Hoff is also well renowned for his innovative approaches to cancer. And if you have, particularly pancreatic cancer, if you have pancreatic cancer, you go see Dr. Van Hoff. So I had a chance to just spend time with him, just one-on-one as, a young, dumb guy, asking really important questions. And I think that just got me really motivated to say, man, we really can make an impact, even outside of the military. You can go make an impact on people's lives doing really cool stuff. And, the easy road is easy. It's not for me. I think a lot of people can go do that, find a nice cushy job with a big company somewhere and sort of disappear. But that's just never been the way I've been wired.
Well, it seems you have a pretty good grasp of it right now. And I can think back to a while back, I saw you on CNN when you were the CEO of Page AI, and you're talking about the importance of artificial intelligence in detecting cancer and the patterns involved. So please take us to that. How is AI used to detect cancer today?
Obviously, AI is everywhere. People talk about AI. I'm sure if I went and took a poll of people on the street, do they really understand AI? Not really. And to back up a second, what is AI? If you talk about artificial intelligence, typically what you're talking about is machine learning. You're talking about using a variety of computer science techniques, early days of these things called convoluted neural networks or serial neural networks. Now you have some different architecture to these types of machine learning applications, but you're essentially teaching the machine to learn something and then predict something. Ultimately, what AI is really very good at is pattern matching. It's just very complex pattern matching. And AI has been around for years, actually. All the stuff in Amazon, when Netflix says, hey, John, I think you'd like this movie versus that movie. That's all AI, right? It's taking learnings from what you'd like to look at and making a prediction about what you'd like to do. And what's been different over the past 2 or 3 years, particularly as the public has gotten really excited about things like ChatGPT and stuff, is the compute power, the ability for these really large models to come into existence have now happened. So it's really people sort of feel like it's magic, this kind of stuff. But, the company I was with was Page, and Page was founded by this guy, Thomas Fuchs, who pioneered this way to sort of train the machine to look for cancer on a glass slide. And to give just a very quick overview of that, right? What happens when you have cancer is you go to a doctor, they take a piece of tissue, like you have skin cancer or colon cancer or mammogram or whatever. They take that tissue, they cut it real thin, they lay it on a glass slide, they stain it, and a doctor, this person who's a pathologist, looks at it. And that's the same process that's been around for 100 years. Like they were doing this in literally like 1905, right? You could take some tissue, cut it thin, right? No changes. And so now when you think about AI, now you're able to apply, and oh, by the way, doctors suck at looking at patterns. Like people do, generally. It's the old, how many jelly beans in a jar problem. You know, if there's like 20 jelly beans, you might be able to get pretty close. If there's 2,564, you're never going to get close, right? So this is the problem. When you're looking at cells on a slide, there are millions of cells on that. So pathologists miss cancer. They'll miss it up to 20% of the time. Or if they do catch it, they may call it something that it's not. And that's the problem, right? I mean, if you're not getting the diagnosis right for cancer to start. So Paige was founded in order to use AI to find cancer on the slide, use it as a tool to help those pathologists get better at what they do. And you see that in radiology. It's pretty prevalent in radiology where you go get a mammogram, there's a radiologist looks at that image. You can use AI to catch those things. You can use AI to look for like lung nodules in a lungs, CT, all this kind of stuff. AI now is just really, really good at pattern matching. It's slowly permeating the clinical practice, but it's slow. And that's the hardest thing about healthcare is like all this amazing technology exists. It just takes forever to get into the actual useful where patients are taking advantage of it.
And that's because the pattern matching is more complex pattern matching than we would associate with most pattern matchings as humans. When we start to see this is a pattern here, this is much more complex. So take us there. How much more complex is it?
Extremely, right? And the other thing you think about AI, the other group that's been using the AI for a long time is the government, Department of Defense, right? DARPA. You know, I mean, we've been using AI to look at satellite scans for a long time, right? And in fact, it's funny because our founder, Thomas, he was actually at JPL, and his first jobs was to develop AI algorithms for the Mars rovers. Because if you think about as you're landing a Mars rover on the surface of Mars, there's all these rocks, there's all these valleys, there's all this stuff going on, but it looks like, what is that, right? You see a camera coming down, and so using AI to pick out, that's a rock, that's a valley, don't land there, that kind of stuff. That's what the initial stuff he did. And he got to thinking about it like, wow, this could be useful to say, because cancer is just essentially cells that don't look like normal cells. You know, your cells have gone haywire. That's what cancer is. Tumors are basically cells that have started to go nuts and mutated and don't stop growing, and they ultimately kill you. They look different. And if they're meaner and more aggressive, they look way different. And that's how the AI is able to do that. It's able to compare millions of these normal looking cells from all the different cells you have in your body to the cancer cells. It's just better at it than people are. Like it just is, you know? And even though no doctor wants to hear that because their whole livelihood's dependent on it, it really is better at finding those types of complex patterns.
How else is AI being used in healthcare?
So Tempus is an interesting company too. So we have been collecting genomic information on cancer patients for a long time. So the company was founded with this vision that not enough data is both available or being used to make the right decisions in healthcare, particularly in cancer, but now we're moving on to cardiology and neurology and some other spaces. But it really is true. Like I would say for the most part, cancer care in the United States is very much a recipe book. You know, they have these things called guidelines. If you go, for example, with a certain type of cancer, they're going to give a certain type of treatment based on the guidelines, what they get paid for. They don't really use a lot of data. And in the beginning of this to start to change has been the genomic revolutions. You have the AI revolution. You also have the genomic revolution. You know, 25 years ago, they did the Human Genome Project. Now, being able to sequence your tumor and understand what genes are driving your cancer is really, really important. We have, 10 years ago or 15 years ago, it was maybe one or two drugs for that type of stuff. Now there's 100 or more that actually target a specific gene and had produced better results for the patient. Problem is not every doctor uses that. So we've been sequencing and doing all this genomics for a long time. And now we have this amazing, and we also get clinical information, John, which is really important. So you take, if you're a smoker or if you're, between ages of 50 and 60 and you took a certain type of drug, like what happened to you? It's important to sort of understand like that follow-up information and all the clinical information. And it's just really, really big data. And now that you have all that data, you can start to do really cool things with AI. right? So one of the things we do at Tempus is we have a front door. We have this thing called Tempus One. We're able now to interrogate this deep pool of data to pull out insights that you'd never be able to pull out. And, there's two reasons to want to do that. One, to help doctors make better informed decisions about certain types of patients. There are a lot of times they just don't know what to do with a patient. Oh, I don't know what to do with this guy. He's got, stage 4 non-small cell lung cancer. These genes aren't right. I don't know. Like, let's look at a cohort of patients that look like him and let's pick a good treatment. AI can help enable that. The other thing that AI can help do is start to do things like in cardiology. There's, for example, you have a whole lot of patients who will go get an ECG, and about 2 or 3% of them will end up getting a stroke or have a heart attack a year later, right? So something happened. So they get that ECG, the doctor says you're fine, and then 6 months later they have some sort of event. There's AI that's been trained on all of that data that is able to pick out those 2 or 3% of patients that may be at risk for some sort of cardiac event. Right? And so we launched that, and we're really imagine a world where anytime you go get an ECG, you may go to the doctor, you get your ECG, doctor says, John, you're looking great. You come home, we actually flag that doctor and say, actually, the AI's found something here. You need to follow up with that patient. And then the doc calls you and says, John, I'm sorry, but actually we run this AI algorithm and it actually has found something anomalous. Come back in. And so you think you start to really prevent a lot of deaths and heart attacks from that sort of thing. So AI is starting to permeate a lot of different healthcare in clinical ways. There's some other AI, makes the doctors' lives easier. It's good, right? Like, it'll listen in, it'll summarize all the notes, it's admin, and admin certainly kills doctors. It's a big part of their burnout. But I think what really gets me excited is when you're really impacting clinical care. You're actually saving people's lives using this technology, and that's what's super exciting.
And you've pointed out that you're on the bleeding edge, so you're seeing all this stuff happen. For a lot of this seems new, but you've been working on this stuff for years. So where do you see the future of AI in healthcare?
It's a great question. The technology itself is far outpacing the market and the healthcare world, even the general world's ability to use it, to understand it and to find the use cases, that kind of stuff. So, if you get way out of the bleeding edge, like the research on AI, the stuff that these guys are doing is really amazing. People talk a lot about AGI, artificial general intelligence. I think you're still going to have very use case driven AI, which means it needs to really understand that specific thing. We're all not experts. I'm not a lawyer. I don't pretend to be one, right? So you can be generally intelligent, but you're not going to be a lawyer. I think AI is going to be the same thing. Like it can generally have a good understanding of a space, but if you wanted to make clinical decisions about cardio events or cancer, it has to be trained on particular data. I should pause for a minute and talk about that because it's really the most important thing. The thing that fuels AI is data. We collect data all over the place. Obviously, ChatGPT and Anthropic and these other groups are making large language models. They're now getting sued because what they just went out is they just scraped the internet. Let's just take all the words and things that the internet has to say. We're going to use that as our data to train. That's great, but what you get is all kinds of crazy stuff because we're human beings and the internet's crazy. So the data really drives the output in a lot of ways. So in medical, in the medical space, the data has to be really good. Like you have to know that that patient actually had cancer, had that genomic mutation and died or responded to the drug, whatever. If you're training it, if the data is not accurate, then you're going to get crappy clinical decision supports. And I think that's going to cause problems because this looks like a really big industry, and it is. You're going to have a lot of jokers and clowns who will come in and try to train algorithms, and we see it already, that are not really robust on the data. And that's going to cause trust issues with doctors, with patients, with hospitals. And they're going to say, oh, well, I saw this AI and it was wrong, all this time. And unless we really have some regulation to help with that. How was the data? What is the data that you're driving on? It's really going to be challenging to get good adoption in the next 10 years. So I don't know, like the 10 to 15 years, I certainly hope there's a world where we see a lot more clinical decisions. That's certainly the vision for Tempus, to make more decisions using data and using AI than is happening today.
Well, you bring up a great point, because we've seen this in the legal sector as well, that there are a lot of jokers and clowns that have a rudimentary understanding of AI, and they're going to try to apply it to their less than spectacular knowledge of how the legal system works, right? And so they come in and they garbage in is garbage out, and it's and sometimes the data is unclean, the understanding is unclean, the command prompts are out of whack, and it's garbage. And we've seen it happen, and we're being sold, this vapor, right? Oh, we've got this great AI product, and it's crap. So how do you know, Andy, like whether it's good or whether it's garbage?
It's a great question. I mean, just speaking specifically for healthcare, right? I mean, to get into healthcare, unlike some of these other areas, even in consumer with ChatGPT and stuff, like healthcare is at least very regulated, at least in the US, certainly in other countries. But it's the FDA, they're really the ones responsible for making sure a medical device, a thing that you make a decision about or give to a patient or a drug or something, is safe and effective. That's their role in government. Nothing more. Doesn't mean that's going to be better than the other thing. Just, is it safe and effective? And I think, at Page, what we are really excited about, what we're most proud of, is we developed an AI for detection of prostate cancer. So prostate cancer is an interesting thing. It's one of those cancers where a lot of men die with prostate cancer. They don't necessarily die of prostate cancer. The mortality rates for prostate cancer are very low. Doesn't mean men don't die. It certainly can be lethal if you let it go. So don't my disclaimer, but generally speaking, compared to pancreatic or whatever, it's not as lethal a disease. But if you have if you have prostate cancer, you have to get it treated. The way that you find out if you have prostate cancer is you can get a blood test called a PSA. Then you go and you get this thing called biopsy. It's miserable for men, right? I won't even describe it because and oh, by the way, veterans, this is a really huge deal. Like the veteran population for prostate cancer is far outpacing the regular population. That's for a lot of cancers too, by the way. We can talk about that later. But we developed this AI system to find prostate cancers where a lot of times it gets missed because it's sort of a random biopsy and you may miss it. And the prostate, we trained it on 70,000 patients working with Memorial Sloan Kettering in New York City. And we submitted it all to the FDA, and the FDA took 2 years to really understand what the heck was going on here, what the data was, what the actual ground truth was. But we got it through, and it's still today. That was over 3 years ago. It was about 3.5 years ago that it got approved, and no one else has been able to bring an FDA-approved product to the space. So it tells you something about the pain and sort of rigor it takes, especially in healthcare, to get something FDA approved. And then if it's FDA approved, you should at least be able to say, okay, that's a good check mark, right? That's something that says it's safe and effective. It's not full of crap. Does it work in the workflow? Does it work all the time? All the stuff you still have to sort out. But yeah, in legal space and like finance tech, in general, consumer and retail, all that stuff, there's no safeguards. There's no guardrails and no really regulatory agency. The Biden administration is starting to come out, this White House executive order about AI. It's pretty toothless. There's not a lot of teeth into anything in AI regulation right now. In Europe, they've kind of gone the opposite way. They've sort of regulated the heck out of all things. And so it's really kind of hard to bring innovation there. So there's a combination that you have to sort of help. I hate to rely on the government to help here, but it's like, if they don't at least give some input to whether AI is good, we're all kind of screwed,
So why did you decide to go into the startup space as opposed to big biotech? Why startup?
I think you just find more innovation. I think when you start with an idea and say, hey, here's something that will help people. I mean, that's really a lot of the startups I've been with, whether it's Tempus or at Page or any other company that I've been with. It's, hey, here's an idea that we think will help people. And, bigger companies, for right or wrong, public or whatever. I mean, a lot of times it's quarterly profit. A lot of times it's just, hey, we have a process here. There's a lot of times, big pharma companies, for example, will buy an asset just to bury it because they might have something competing, and And so it becomes a challenge when you have a capitalistic healthcare system, which we do in the United States. The innovations that really, 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 really help patients kind of bubble up from the bottom. They don't really start up there. I think a lot of innovative larger companies, we're partnered with AstraZeneca as an example. I think they like to look at smaller biotechs as sort of the engine of innovation for them. So come in and hey, I like what you're doing there, and either partner with you as they've done with Tempus or buy, a company and bring it in. But I think if you're at that cutting edge, you're really able to sort of solve the hard problems. Why I get up every day right now is not only to help people, because we know we're doing good work to help people, but it's just work on really hard problems, and when you work with a lot of smart people also working on those hard problems, your day goes pretty fast, and it's pretty rewarding.
What are the leadership skills necessary to be successful in a startup?
Yeah, the other thing, John, as a veteran, there's this misperception, particularly among big companies, I would think for sure, but generally in the population, that if you're in the military, like you're rigid, it's impossible to deal with new situations. You were given a command and you followed that command, like you didn't think for yourself. Like there's still that perception out there. I think there's a lot of the general public, like, oh, military, like, oh, he's going to be real rigid and can't like think for himself or that kind of stuff, which, as you know, could not be part of the truth, right? I mean, generally military members with the Army, wherever you were, like the ability to work in ambiguous situations, that's all we did. Like the ability to lead people into where you have no idea what's going to happen or what the outcomes are going to be, but you have training and you have some discipline to sort of understand how to get there. That's what you do every day. And so that leadership is the biggest piece. It's like, I tell people all the time, I have no idea what's going to happen here, right? We have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. That's the most important leadership skills. And you have to sort of help people with that. Not everybody in the general population is okay with that. They don't like that. But if you can get the right organization that sort of says, hey, I believe in this guy. He puts a little process, a little discipline, a little training around what we're doing. But also understanding that we're going to try stuff. It may not work. That may fail. But let's fail fast, no blame, and let's move on to the next thing. Those are really the big leadership skills. Like you have to be able to lead people in ambiguous situations. You have to be able to get them motivated, moving in one direction. You have to get them over the failures quickly, because you're going to get failures. You're going to try something and it's going to, it's going to buy it or it's going to fail disastrously or whatever. You have to get them over that quickly and say, we're fail fast and let's move on, and those are really the biggest things I've seen in startups. I think most startups that don't do well are the ones that sort of, it's an interesting statement. You've heard it too, where it's like people fall in love with their solution. They don't fall in love with the problem. And so instead of solving the problem, they try to take their solution and force it. And that doesn't always work, right? So you have to really understand the problem and tailor that solution to that problem. So startups that fail, the leadership that doesn't help with ambiguous situations and that kind of stuff, I think the ones that do well.
Yeah, and I think there's a misconception too about startups that if you have an education, you come from let's just put this in context of a conversation you and I had months ago where there was an individual from one of the top business schools in the country with zero experience comes to you and says, I want to be your chief strategy officer. And you're like, yeah, but what have you done? So, just because it's a startup company doesn't mean we're starting with zero experience. So talk us through that. How do you choose the team?
Yeah, great question. There's, my career, John, I'm sure you've seen it too. There's a ton of value to that person you just described, that business school, younger person, because they see the world with kind of fresh eyes. And that's a good thing. That's not wrong, but doesn't necessarily mean they should be leading a strategy group in driving, what you're doing going forward, because the ability to see around corners kind of means you've been around the corner before. You know what I mean? Like it's sort of the rare person who understands what's gonna, is there an ambush happening around the corner? If they've never been there, and it's, you don't really get that from business school. You don't get that. You have to be out in the world and do that. But, I think there's value in sort of bringing those kind of really, really smart people along, but it's all about the role that you're in. Right. And so I think it's a combination of having people who have been there a little bit, who have the technical skills, but maybe need some experience. All the way down to some of these younger folks who can start to dive in and want to be excited about what a startup or biotech's doing. At Tempest, we have a lot of that kind of makeup. It's really just smart people, don't necessarily always understand healthcare or the healthcare system or how this all works or how doctors operate, those kind of things, but they're willing, have a great attitude, and want to go and try to solve hard problems. So, solving for attitude is kind of number one. Solving for experience is maybe number two. Solving for education, maybe down the line a little bit. But I think if you look for those two things up front, you're going to get a pretty good team.
Andy, that's some great wisdom there. It's always multidimensional. This takes us to the after action review, the 3 examples of great leadership and the 3 examples of terrible leadership. So if you could give us 3 examples of great leadership that you either experienced in the military or in the startup world.
Great leadership to me was always about taking care of your people. Mission first, people always, right? I still use that line. I'm sure we all do, right? But it means, hey, you got to get the thing done, but you only got in the back of your mind as a leader, take care of your people. And, when we were in Iraq, we were flying missions, and this is a complaint that just said we were flying a lot of hours. We're not supposed to fly those many hours. The crew was dead. We were, way over high time as far as flights go. And, our commanding officer, even though he had, a mandate to get missions completed, he recognized, hey, these guys are going to die, right? If I don't get them, and so he sent us off to some boondoggle for 5 days, I think an air show in the UK, kind of thing, get your heads right, and then come back into the fray, right? And I think about that a lot, just from the perspective of, he didn't have to do that, right? He could have just, hey, suck it up, guys, get out there. But I think that's also seeing around a corner to say, if I keep these guys at it, there could be an incident. These guys are worn out, aircraft goes in and, they make a mistake, they fly into Iran or something, like, that's bad, right? So sometimes, not sometimes, I would say all the time, taking care of your people and making sure that where the limits are and the lines are for them is a great example of good leadership. And so I remember that from my days, my old CEO at Buckley. In the civilian world of the past 20 years, I've just seen really good leaders in similar ways. I think it's just about recognizing people's strengths. I was fortunate enough, as I just got out of the military, I sort of had a leader, a mentor who'd been in healthcare his whole life, recognizing me, kind of what we were just talking about. Hey, here's a really smart guy, good experience in the military. What does he know about healthcare? But he's a good operator. So he kind of pulled me in, made me an operator, and led to me becoming a VP very quickly, just because he was like, this guy, let's put him in the right role, And I think that was really good leadership too. It's about recognizing people and saying, hey, here's somebody who maybe not perfect over here, but man, if I put him in an operator role, all his experience in the military and that kind of stuff, he's going to kill it. And I did. And it really, made a difference in the organization. So finding those types of roles, I think are really important. Bad leadership, it's funny. I think about a time, it was a training exercise, and just like in surgery, after you're done with surgery, you have to count up all the tools, right? You don't want to leave a clamp inside the patient, right? So you count all the tools, you do an inventory. Same thing before you go fly. You have to make sure if somebody came out to work on your airframe, whatever, all the tools are counted. Can't fly if you're missing a tool, right? And so we were missing a tool, right? And this was a really high visibility exercise. We call it in, look, we can't find this tool, whatever. And the operations officer, who will go unnamed, came out of the aircraft and he said, what are you missing? And we told him. He disappeared. He came back 10 minutes later and he goes, here it is, go. And we all knew damn well that wasn't the tool, right? Like, we all knew he went back inside, you think it was like a crank or something, got a crank, brought it out. And we, this was a tough thing, man. Like, I remember I was not the mission commander on that mission, but, the MC just kind of looked at him and, hey, can I talk to you? And, brought him aside and they talked and, you got to get this mission done and all that kind of crap. We flew. I never puckered up this tight, the entire flight, praying that freaking tool went in the gearbox and, number 2 wasn't going to explode, because this guy, he basically put the mission ahead of his people. And blatantly broke rules. So I think that's, that kind of leadership is just the worst. When you put your career, how you're going to look, your perspective, how people see you ahead of the people who are working for you, man, that's just the worst kind of leadership. And it's funny in the civilian world, I don't see it. It's really not as egregious as that. What you see is sort of the same kind of thing. People taking credit for your work, trying to climb the corporate ladder, just sort of putting their foot, on your head and getting up above you. And so nothing really specific comes to mind from that perspective, but you see it. And when you see it, you just know it's just the worst kind of leadership.
Absolutely. And Dr. Andy Moye, always been a good friend, always a smart guy that can hold a great conversation just about anything, any topic, any subject, from leadership to science to literature. Love talking with you. How can people learn more about Dr. Andy Moye?
Tempest.com. Look at Tempest. You can find me on LinkedIn. Search Andy-Moye on LinkedIn. I typically do quite a few of these, find me at stage. I'm speaking in Canada, actually, at the Health Innovation Summit in November. I'm giving a lecture at Stanford in December to their AI group. So find me at sort of the precision medicine, various conferences and things like that going forward.
Great. Thanks so much for coming on the show and sharing your knowledge with your fellow veterans on Veteran Led.
Thanks, John. It's been great. Appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us today on Veteran Led, where we pursue our mission of promoting veteran leadership in business, strengthening the veteran community, and getting veterans all of the benefits that they earn. If you know a leader who should be on the Veteran Led podcast, report to our online community by searching @Veteran Led on your favorite social channels and posting in the comments. We want to hear how your military challenges prepared you to lead your industry or community, and we will let the world know. And of course, hit subscribe and join me next time on Veteran Led.